From 1941 to 1945, the United States was engaged in the greatest war in history. 15 million American men went off to fight, some to die, in foreign land. But most people did not go overseas. They experienced the war here at home. For many, it is still the central experience of their lives.
I think World War II was really a kind of an experience that was the good guys versus the bad guys. It was very clear in everybody's mind who was right and who was wrong.
I don't like the connection between God and war. When people fight wars, they think God is on their side. It's ridiculous.
World War II made me grow up. World War II gave me a sense of belonging to the United States of America, being very much a part of it.
In looking back over the years, back to that period, they were the happiest of times in some ways, and in other ways the saddest. Very saddest.
It just changed my whole life. And I know it's terrible to say that about the war, but I can't remember anything that the war didn't do for me as a person inside.
This is the story of the American people during World War II. How they lived, what they thought, and how they were forever changed.
Now the crisis story on this side of the Pacific.
The Japanese envoys in Washington have arranged to confer with Secretary of State Cordell Hull at 11 o'clock tomorrow morning.
Japan's relations with the United States may come to a head tomorrow. Here's the crisis news as reported from the Far East danger points.
Just Molly and me, and baby makes three. We're happy in my blue heaven.
It is the 12th year of the Great Depression. By 1941, the worst is over. Yet a decade of hard times has worked its way into the very fabric of American society. After years of unemployment, the ordinary man feels lucky to have a job. Any job. But the discouraging fact is that most jobs pay little, and there's little hope for advancement. Now the American people dream of security, not opportunity.
Mussolini's newspaper acknowledged that it seems probable that the United States...
But just as one national crisis recedes, another more dangerous one is taking its place. In newsreels, Americans watch as Hitler's armies roll across one country after another. By December of 1941, Hitler has conquered most of Europe and invaded Russia. Now Americans believe it's only a matter of time before a greater German empire threatens us. The danger of war is even more immediate in the Far East. Hitler's ally, Japan, has invaded China. All signs indicate that she's planning to attack Western bases in the Pacific.
The threats of another general war are increasing by the hour.
The American people know that war is coming. They may not know why exactly, but they know it will happen. The only question is when. Saturday, December 6th, will be the last day of peace in America. The war that will come tomorrow will not be fought on American shores, but it will change forever the American way of life.
I was cutting out my daughter's Christmas program dress, and suddenly my husband's voice boomed through our laughter and said, "Shut up, keep still."
The Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor, the United States naval base in the Hawaiian Islands. The next day, President Franklin Delano Roosevelt addresses the nation.
December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy. The United States of America was suddenly and deliberately attacked by naval and air forces of the Empire of Japan. I ask that the Congress declare a state of war.
4 days later, Germany declares war on the United States. Italy, the third Axis power under Benito Mussolini, follows suit. In the days and weeks that follow, Americans on both coasts are braced for an attack. Unidentified planes are sighted everywhere. False alarms are triggered by nervous officials. Panic and confusion set in.
On the West Coast, there was this feeling that I gained really from the adults that the Japanese were going to actually go beyond the Hawaiian Islands and attack the mainland.
Citizens are told to cover their windows and extinguish all lights. Entire cities are blacked out to prevent enemy pilots from navigating over U.S. territory.
There were searchlights, of course, most every night. You could see them. And they were really looking for planes that were coming over. And a lot of people said that they saw them, and I guess they did. I got all my family. We got in the center closet, center hall, rather. So we felt like we had a little protection there. I don't know what we were doing, but that was the only place we had to go. And it was really a horrifying experience.
No matter what our enemies, in their desperation, may attempt to do to us, we will say, as the people of London have said, we can take it. And what's more, we can give it back, and we will give it back with compound interest.
From San Francisco to New York, enlistment centers for the Army, the Navy, and the Marines are immediately jammed with long lines of men. Men who have found their hearts eager to fight for this challenged nation. America's manhood marches. Its destination, victory.
We immediately went down to the Marine headquarters and had to stand into a very long line to try and enlist in the Marines. When it came my turn to try and pass on in, there was a man at the telephone who asked my name, and he announced it into the telephone. He told me to step out of the line, that I was being drafted on the following Monday. And sure enough, on Monday, I got my letter from the President of the United States saying greetings. And on January 12th of 1942, I was in the Army.
The war just turned the whole world upside down. Everything changed immediately. From the smallest thing, from the food you put on your table, to your relationship with your own boyfriend. Most of my friends were connected with the National Guard, and of course, all the girls and fellows knew each other. The girls discussed how fearful they were. The men seemed to put on a very brave front and almost a happy front. And then we all realized that this was probably the last time we were all going to be together.
Goodbye, Mama, I'm off to Yokohama for the red, white, and blue, my country and you. Goodbye, Mama, I'm off to Yokohama just to teach all those Japs. The Yanks are no saps, a million fighting sons of Uncle Sam, if you please. We'll soon have all those Japs right down on their Japanese. Goodbye, Mama, I'm off to Yokohama for my country, my flag, and you.
Compared to her enemies, the United States is unprepared for modern war. For several years, the factories of Japan and Germany have been turning out vast quantities of weapons. In World War II, it is machines as well as men that will turn the tide of battle. The war is a race to produce weapons and material, and America is behind.
The United States must build planes and tanks and guns and ships to the utmost limit of our national capacity. We must raise our sights all along the production line. Let no man say it cannot be done. It must be done, and we have undertaken to do it.
But to produce for war, the nation must stop producing for the consumer. For weeks after Pearl Harbor, the largest factories are still turning out cars and other civilian goods. To speed up the conversion process, the federal government offers industry generous financial incentives. War contracts call for a guaranteed profit on each item produced.
I was working for General Motors AC Spark Plug Division, and my area of responsibility was planning for manufacturing. Right after Pearl Harbor, we got the signal that we should put our total efforts into conversion to war production. The equipment that we were using was just not the type of equipment that you use for war goods. So these areas had to be gutted or stripped, and the new equipment brought in produced the war goods. And it was really a large-scale, complicated, busy activity turning that plant around. In fact, we jokingly said, and often true, that you went through a door in the morning that wasn't even there in the afternoon.
Months and years are being compressed into days. Manufacturers have switched from model trains to machine guns, lipstick cases to cartridge shells, lamps to bomb noses.
We worked 7 days a week, 3 shifts a day. There was no time off. There was a constant battle against a production schedule that just never stopped from the beginning of the project until the end of the war.
But speed and conversion are not enough. America needs new plants, new steel mills, new airplane factories. The shipyards must be enlarged, doubled and tripled in size. War production will cost a colossal amount of money. To meet the production needs of 1942, the government will spend $53 billion. Now there are jobs, plenty of jobs, and at high wages too.
When I went to work in the Navy Yard after coming out of the shops in Pennsylvania, it just felt like that something came down from heaven. I went from 40 cents an hour to $1 an hour. We had all the overtime we want, and I felt like at last I'm getting up in the world. I was able to buy my clothes, buy a suit, buy some working clothes for a change, and I didn't need to depend on somebody's hand-me-downs. It just made a different man out of me.
It's a time of opportunity again in America. It's a time of opportunity especially for the underclass, for those broken by the Depression, for those who have never tasted the fruits of America, like the Yarkees and Okies, still traveling the route between Oklahoma and California, still looking for work, the West Virginia hill folk, leaving small farms where they made $300 a year cash. There are farm boys from Kansas, Nebraska, and Iowa, cowboys from Montana and the Dakotas, cab drivers, clerks, and mechanics from New York and Boston. The big money now is in the war plants. Everyone is on the move, heading for the money. The Great Depression is over.
I'm no millionaire, but I'm not the type to care, 'cause I've got a pocket full of dreams.
Nearly 20 million Americans will pick up stakes and settle somewhere else during the war. People are heading for the cities where the steel mills and factories are going up, or to the shipyards on the coast, to Mobile, Norfolk, Philadelphia. Most of all, they're heading out west, to the aircraft plants and shipyards in Los Angeles, San Diego, Portland, Seattle,
live in luxury, 'cause I've got a pocket full of dreams.
As workers stream in, the defense towns are overwhelmed. Small cities like San Diego and Mobile find their populations doubling almost overnight. Life here is congested, frantic, exciting. The boom town is America's new melting pot.
There was no industry around where we lived. So in order for my husband and I both to have jobs, we had to go to an industrial portion of the nation. So we moved. We all moved in so quickly that there wasn't housing. We lived in storefronts, we lived in converted garages, but at the same time it was a complete learning process for me. I met new people, I learned different accents, and I had to concentrate just a little more. I liked the way of life that it opened for me. I saw people doing different things. We went out a lot. We went out to nightclubs. Now, I had never been to a nightclub. It was like a whole new world had opened up, and I never went back. I never wanted to go back.
The Depression is over for some. For others, opportunity is still far away. When blacks apply for jobs opening up in the defense industries, the answer is usually, we're not hiring. One company states, the Negro will be considered only as janitors and in other similar capacity. In the defense plants and everywhere else in America, the black is low man on the totem pole.
One of my first jobs, when I arrived in Philadelphia, it was as a butler in Chestnut Hill. My second job, I went with Philadelphia Transom Company as a laborer. I was not able to become a bus driver or dispatcher or anything in other departments. They said they definitely did not want no blacks because they was inferior and they had a certain amount of disease and they would smell this, everything that they could possibly say about a black.
Fascism was not a monopoly of Hitler, was not a monopoly of Mussolini. It was something that we saw every day on the streets of Baltimore and in other places. That inconsistency was the fact that we were presenting ourselves as the advocate, spokesman, the defender of democracy, and yet we were practicing the very reverse at home. The black community did not see much sense in the war unless the war were tied to a commitment for change on the domestic scene. There was a feeling that now is the time to make these changes, and there was a recognition that if we don't change these patterns in employment, fairly soon these industries that are looking for people will have the people they need, however, and blacks might still be outside.
The world today.
But racial discrimination is not a matter of national concern. Even those who say they're for social reform have turned their attention elsewhere. One war is enough to fight, and no energy can be diverted from that goal. And the war is now frighteningly close to American shores. German submarines are sinking American ships just a few miles off the East Coast, sometimes at the rate of 2 or 3 a day.
In perhaps the boldest attack yet made upon American shipping, an Axis submarine has torpedoed a large merchant vessel within 1.5 miles of the mouth of the Mississippi River. They have struck in the St. Lawrence and several times in the Gulf of Mexico to the north and south of the Mississippi.
War news from the Pacific is even more alarming. Allied outposts in the Far East are crumbling under Japanese attack. Each month brings news of another major defeat or reversal.
The Japanese offensive against the Allied nations in the Pacific is driving ahead at increased speed tonight.
Americans are at a loss to explain the succession of defeats. Time magazine says the fate of the nation hangs in the balance.
Exhausted by insufficient
In April, the American stronghold in the Philippines falls to the Japanese.
The number of men involved on Bataan makes it one of the worst American reverses in foreign war. 36,800 American and Filipino soldiers faced death or capture.
In the town of Maywood, Illinois, the loss of Bataan is felt dearly. 5,000 men from the Illinois National Guard are killed, wounded, or captured on Bataan. Their names are posted on the Maywood Honor Roll.
We have in our town today 2 mothers, each of whom has given 2 sons already. And as I said before, we'll give our sons, we'll give our lives, but by the help and grace of God, we will not give up a free America or our democratic way of life.
America has now endured a half a year of defeat. To boost public spirit, towns and cities across the country stage victory rallies.
The spirit of the American people was never higher than it is today. The Union was never more closely knit together, and this country was never more deeply determined to face the solemn tasks before it.
We pulled together, and it was a feeling that I have never seen happen any other time in this country to this very day.
We're all in it, we're all in it, the banker, the broker, the cowboy, the stoker, we're all in it now.
The government urges everyone to participate in community war programs. By spring of 1942, 1 out of every 10 Americans is involved in one program or another.
Because I was 4F, I couldn't be a general and I couldn't work down to a private, so I figured, what else can I do? So the result of it was that I went into civilian defense as an air raid warden, which is the first step civilly, locally. And I organized the first post that had a full demonstration of what air raid wardens should do. And we had over 2,000 spectators lined up all around the neighborhood. We had these trucks running around throwing 4th of July flares to imitate magnesium bombs, things like that, and then we'd have people faint, pretend they were hurt. It was up to us to take care of them until a medic would come along. We had everybody from bricklayers and janitors on up to stockbrokers, like I was at the time, and bankers. We had housekeepers, people in all fields of endeavor.
It was very, very easy to get anyone to volunteer to help toward the war effort, because that was the main effort in all of our lives, was to end this war before it reached our shores, especially. I was concerned about my son. He hadn't finished high school when he volunteered. Anything that I could do, I wanted to do, and I did it.
Junk ain't junk no more, 'cause junk can win the war. What junk to you has a job to do, 'cause junk ain't junk no more. Pots and pans, old garbage cans, the kettle that doesn't pour. Collect today for the USA, 'cause junk can win the war.
Saturdays and after schools were always taken up with activities for the war effort, and things like scrap drives and collecting tin and tin foil, taking grease down to the butcher shop. That whole idea of saving and rationing, sugar was rationed, gasoline was rationed, that whole notion that it was saving lives overseas by us doing without.
Americans are asked to give till it hurts. Most of all are asked to give money. Money to buy war bonds. Bonds are helping finance the war.
Hollywood's most famous movie stars leave the film capital to help the government sell war bonds. And how that crowd lines up to buy bonds from their favorites. They buy knowing that every dollar invested helps send more planes, tanks, and ships to the United Nations.
The tall man with a high hat will be coming down your way. Get your savings out when you hear him shout, any bonds today, any bonds today. Bonds of freedom, that's what I'm selling, any bonds today. Scrape up the most you can, here comes the freedom man.
Asking you to buy your share of freedom today. Money stamps today, give kiddies. We'll be blessed if we all invest in the USA.
Here comes the freedom man, asking you to buy your share of freedom today. In his hands today. We'll be blessed, we all invest in the USA. Here comes the freedom man, and make tomorrow's plan. Now to let you buy your share of freedom today.
The country is now deeply suspicious of anyone un-American. At first, the suspicion extends to all enemy aliens. Italian, German, and Japanese suspects are interrogated, some arrested. But very soon, the suspicion centers on the Japanese.
When the war started, I was a fishing business in Terminal Islands with the rest of the 3,500 Japanese fishermen. Now, on February 1942, we were ordered to stay home, not to go out of fishing. And we put away all the nets, tied the boats, and all you have to do is stay home and watch what's going on.
Up and down the West Coast, the slogan of the day is, "Watch those Japs."
I was married and had 2 children and was expecting a third, and we had started a nursery and had been working on it day and night for about a year, and we were just starting to sell, and then everything went up in the air.
To many Americans, there is now little distinction between the Japanese enemy and Japanese here at home. Rumors spread that American defeats in the Pacific were due to spying by Japanese in America.
From the White House today came the most drastic action yet taken against possible fifth column activity, sabotage and spying on the Pacific coast.
In February, the government begins evacuating all West Coast Japanese. More than 110,000 people, 2/3 of them citizens, are forced to leave their homes and businesses.
We were all sitting on the bus, and I was thinking, gee, everybody's so brave, nobody's crying, and I wasn't going to cry either. And then this lady came up to me, and she looked in the bus window, and she said, oh, you have a tiny baby. How old is the baby? And I said, 3 weeks. And I cried all the way. And I felt like a fool, because nobody else cried. They didn't even cry when I cried. They were that, they could hold it in that much.
I lost everything. I had 3 sets of a net. One is the tuna nets, next one is the mackerel nets, and another one is for sardines. The 3 different sets, which cost me almost about $55,000. It's already paid. I worked so hard. I just paid everything up. I try to find every way what become of all the properties. Nobody seems to know.
By August, the internment is complete. For nearly 3 years, the Japanese will be imprisoned in remote and desolate parts of the country. Not one charge of sabotage is ever substantiated.
Today, we say with pride and humility that we are Americans, knowing in our hearts that Americanism, in its deepest meaning, stands for the freedom and the welfare and the brotherhood of the plain people of the world, wherever they may be.
Deep down in my heart, I didn't have this loyalty, this patriotism, because let's face it, I had never really experienced some of the things in life that I would have loved to experience and that maybe was worth fighting for.
While America is fighting for democracy abroad, racial tensions here at home are on the rise. The poisoned relations between blacks and whites in America begin to erupt in violent incidents.
There were riots in various communities around the country. There was a feeling on the part of people living under almost intolerable conditions that there is no real hope for significant change.
At Army bases, especially in the South, black and white soldiers are involved in racial clashes. Some are killed. In Harlem, a riot is touched off by a rumor that police have shot a black GI. But the worst race riot of the war occurs in Detroit. The mixture of white migrants from the South and northern blacks is a powder keg about to explode.
Governor Kelly of Michigan has ordered martial law in Detroit, where race riots have killed 11 men and injured more than 500 since last midnight. Martial law will take effect at 10 p.m. Eastern Wartime.
When the rioting is over, 25 blacks and 9 whites have died.